this year.
The following program contains views that are not those of WVTC, iNetworks Communications, their subsidiaries, affiliates, or financial supporters.
Winning victory through Christ, WVTC Allsip Chicago, an iNetworks communication station.
Welcome to Exposing the Narratives, where we examine, reveal, and discuss various topics, events, and of course, the narratives in the spirit of kingdom building through Jesus Christ. Hosted by three awesome men of God, Reverend Morris, aka Frankie D, Pastor Clarence W. Holloway III, pastor of Living Water MB Church, and Pastor Eric Taylor, aka Tae, pastor of Manifest Ministries. And now, join us in Exposing the Narrative.
Welcome everybody once again to Exposing the Narrative. How you guys doing today? It's Pastor Tae.
What's going
Introduce
on?
yourself.
What's going on?
If you guys notice, we got two guests, but actually we have one person who's not a guest. He's a great friend of ours, and we're glad to have him on. Introduce yourself for the audience there for me.
Minister Ellis D. Jemerson, aka Minister EDJ. So proud to be on here with you guys on today. So excited.
Praise God, praise God. This gentleman, I want to definitely read his resume. He came in. We thank God for coming in, and just this awesome young man. We praise God for him. Jason A. Peake is the second. Jason is a native of Wisconsin, holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and a Master's Social Work with a specialization of clinical work with children and families, both from Loyola University. Jason also holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Illinois, Chicago, School of Law. While in graduate school, Jason provided free psychological therapy services to underprivileged children in Chicago, South and West Side. Served as a court-appointed special advocate in Cook County, Illinois, where he advocates for the best interest of foster children in the Child Protective Division. His resume goes on and on. We want to welcome to the show. Thank God for you being here today. Welcome here today, Brother Jason. Thank you so much for coming.
Likewise. Thank you very much. And I don't have any cool nicknames like everyone else, but I guess you can call me JP.
JP. All right. How if you hear me?
Cool.
All right.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Well, he said you the second, right?
I am the second.
You the second? Jason picking Deuce in the house. Deuce in the house.
We thank y'all for tuning in. We have an awesome show.
If you can't laugh, you ain't living. I'm sorry.
It's right. It's right. It's therapy. It's therapy. Definitely, it's therapy.
Yeah.
And if we have an awesome show today, we'll kick it around with our subject. We talked about so much. I want to go with Jason first. Basically, you have a very vast resume. And I see some things you do. You do have a heart for children and what goes on children and their background, so their foster care. So I want to ask you a question. First, this here: what made you choose this field?
Sure. That dates all the way back to when I was 1. So my biological parents divorced when I was just under 1, and their litigation over child-related issues lasts literally until I was 18.
Wow.
I had 2 attorneys as a child growing up. My dad was on a sober link for a number of years. I had supervised a visitation as well. I mean, literally everything that you can get court ordered related to children, I have had between ages 1 and 18. And I began working for a divorce lawyer when I was 15 years old. And really going through my childhood, it was pretty clear that I wanted nothing at all to do with this area. But it's really an area of law that I've gravitated towards.
Mhm.
Mostly because I literally don't know what it's like to not talk about a divorce every single day. I mean, honestly, right? A childhood, undergrad, a law school, now this.
That asks, do you have any siblings?
Yes,
Okay,
All-
okay, all right.
all sisters. Yep.
Okay. That's a question that affect them as well. Older, I'm you again. James, are they older than you, or younger than you, or you middle child? Where do you fit the alignment?
Both. I am right in the middle.
Okay.
You're the middle child. Okay.
Yeah.
Middle child. It's just an experience.
Now, so you have a very vast resume. You deal with children. Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
What I was saying, he said from the age of 1 to the age of 18, you were represented by these lawyers because your parents were going through a divorce.
Right.
So we assume that it lasted all those years. What was the contention? Was it the children?
The contention was,
You know,
I mean, now that I look at it,
looking back.
the contention was my parents really didn't know each other. They knew each other for maybe a year and a half, 2 years prior to a marriage, and then they began having kids. And if you don't know who you're having a kid by, how can you raise them together, right? And also mix in their mental health challenges, mix in their alcoholism, mix in their
Okay.
don't really know each other, right?
Okay.
That's going to really, it's really going to drag this out. So,
Can I ask you a question?
And
was a
you brought a
kid.
thought back into my mind. Yeah, you brought a thought back into my mind.
sure.
My parents had a conversation with us. I couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and they were talking about getting a divorce. And the kids, there's 10 years between me and my older sisters, 5 years my next sister, and 7 years my next sister. And we were sitting on the porch, and my older sister had just said, well, whoever get the house, that's who I'm staying with. And we laugh about it today, right?
Yep.
We laugh about it today because our parents never got divorced. And when you talk about all the issues, we just had a Sunday school lesson talking about the dynamics of leadership and family. And I went back to demonstrate to the congregation, we all come from dysfunctional families. It's just what degree of dysfunction you come from. Because if we look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ, he comes from a dysfunctional family.
Sure.
Right.
King David was in his ancestry. Dysfunction.
Right. Well, if I can, that wasn't the only divorce as a child. So after that, my parents both remarried. My dad was married for about 15, 16 years, and then obviously he got a divorce. And then my mom was married for about 20 years, and then she got a divorce. So by the time I had graduated undergrad, I had lived through 3 of them as a child.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, James, you said a question. We'll go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Brother JP, during that 18-year span, from from what you can recall, where was your voice during that process? I mean, was there a moment during that 18 years that you had something that you want to say? And if it was something that needed to be said, was it being heard? Like, what was the voice like for you during that time?
That's a good question. Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry.
Very good question. And if I can give a biblical example,
Please.
I was Jesus literally turning over tables trying to get people to listen to me. Right?
Wow.
You asked, you didn't listen, and now look, right? I gotta go in here and mess up some stuff, right? Because nobody's listening to me. So that's how I felt constantly for 18 years, right? Why are attorneys asking me questions? Why are judges asking me questions? Why are my parents asking me questions? And then, of course, when you're African American and you're getting a divorce, right? It's not that you're only divorcing the other person, right? You're literally divorcing an entire community. You're divorcing your aunts and uncles. You're divorcing the church, right? You often witness that when African Americans get a divorce, there's always this debate about, well, which one's gonna remain in this congregation, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I felt is that everybody's asking me questions and yet nobody's listening. Where was my voice? It depended on what the issue was. I felt as if my mom was more proactive to ask us questions. But then oftentimes what parents do, which is just not healthy, it's not amicable, right? Is that they'll listen to the children, but then they'll twist it and tailor it so that it kind of supports them more, right?
Okay.
So then as a child, your voice ends up getting lost. So yes, for 18 years, voice was there, and I've always been relatively vocal and honest with everybody in my life, hence becoming an attorney. But my voice was often lost. So
let me also add
one thing to follow up on that.
Yeah.
By you having these attorneys, was there one advocate that listened to you? Because you said before, at the age of 15, you worked in a law office. Was that the person that listened?
The person that listened most, I got to be honest, was my great grandmother. She passed away in not mid 2000s, but maybe 2008, 2010, somewhere around then. And also a prayer, to be honest, right? I believe it or not, I believe everyone here is a pastor, or maybe two out of the three.
He had pastor in training. He just
okay,
he had pastor in training.
All three of us actually.
Well, great. Believe it or not, my initial career of choice, probably from kindergarten maybe through 6th grade, was to be a pastor. So I prayed a lot, right? Because that, was always a person that was there and actually willing, with an open ear to actually listen to what I had to say.
Yeah. What was that?
So I did that. I changed my lighting.
What was the response of your peers during that time?
So a unique situation. From pre-K 3 through 12th grade, I went to private Lutheran education. So for the vast majority of my peers, the teachers, educators, they really didn't know what I was going through as a child, right? Because it wasn't okay for your parents to get a divorce. So to be quite honest, I really didn't talk about it much. However, once I got older, probably the 7th or 8th grade, where I recognized, look, my parents aren't the only ones that aren't amicable, right? They're not the only ones that aren't together. That's when I found classmates who were also going through that. And I really can't remember what we talked about other than really just as a child, something that continuously came to mind. As easy as it may sound, it's hard. Can't we all just get along, right? I tell my clients now, look, I know you're getting a a divorce, and right now you may very well dislike the person that you once loved. But look, you got kids. You're going to have to communicate literally for the rest of your life because you have children, right? And if we get very litigious in your case, or you're asking your attorney, to be overly aggressive about an issue that's just not worth it, you're really ruining a relationship that you actually will rely on for the rest of your life.
What would you say as far as percentage wise, just to guess, when you deal with cases like that, what is the percentage of those cases where the concern is about the children?
When the concern is about the children, I guess logistically speaking, if it's a non-divorce case, right, then your only issues, I guess not only, but your primary issues are issues related to children. There are cases where the parties have lots of income, where their main issue throughout the entire case is, look, the kids are going to be okay. We're just going to tell the kids X, Y, and Z. But my main issue is how much money am I going to get, right? Which is also not okay. There should be a little bit more focus on children. And given that this is a gospel radio network, I just want to highlight that for the listeners, what I often get when I represent African Americans, particularly those who are Christians, is I often have to argue and debate with my African American Christian clients about mental health, right? The answer is always go to church, pray about it. That's a great answer. But at the same time, right, we have to do some on the ground work. And particularly when you put this into the context of litigation, right? We don't really consider religion much. So if you're asking me as your attorney to argue with a judge about not enrolling your child in any kind of mental health therapy or programming, it could also be Christian related therapy, right? It just doesn't look the greatest when you're litigating a case. But I going back to your initial question, those I think would be the main issues, right? Children, financials, mental health.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I don't think people really understand how important it is to have that that critical support group during those moments, right? I'm actually in the process of trying to get into that field myself, and one of the things that's always a concern to me is, especially when you talk about the religious aspect. I'm actually doing a course next year in my institute next year that deals with the church's response and responsibility towards mental health. And don't get me wrong, listen, the church is very vital when it comes to the well-being of the family. However, there are just certain areas that as clergy, we're not equipped to handle. And we should be humble enough to say there's other avenues, including us,
right,
that can help and get through this moment.
I agree 100%.
One thing, I totally agree with you, Reverend Jemison. I totally agree with you. But there's one thing that as leaders in the church, we have to be open to the form of communication, even outside our scriptorial duty. There's a story in the Bible about the lunatic, right?
Yeah.
But the lunatic had to have a father and a mother. right? But when Jesus healed him and he became normal, he went back. Well, we're not Jesus. So when I take classes to give people biblical instruction, and there's a certain point in that instruction where you need to go and get evaluated, because your problem can be simply seeing the right doctor to give you the right prescription to level out your normalcy. Anybody that acts crazy now, everybody wants to say that they're bipolar. It's not always bipolar. It could be as simple as being scarred in adolescence and never getting the therapy. And I'm just talking about no medication, just to talk to those issues, because I come across so many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that are still in an adolescent hurt place. And I can only go so far with them.
Right.
Because I don't have the clinical side. I just know how can I put this so I won't get any legal trouble? I know how to evaluate the situation through conversation. And one of the biggest things, JP, when you said no one was listening to you, we could solve so many problems if we just listen.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, a lot of times it's sad with us, is even as teenagers and adults as well, we sometimes already, when a person says something, we already have what we're going to respond to the person rather than listen. And matter of fact, you hearing them, but you definitely ain't taking this in because you so quick want to say your response. You already got a response ready. That's the sad part with us. Now, sometimes you guys said maybe us as clergy now more than ever, maybe we should start taking some type of not so much classes, so much going far as training with someone like yourself, Jason, and say, hey, like a workshop, how we can do, what we do, where we should refer somebody, and then have a list of people we've checked out that we can refer people to, because I don't want to send anybody to just a brochure I picked up. I'm always a firm person. If I send a person and say, check this person out, I didn't check them out. So I think we should start doing, as clergy, start to look and say, how can I be a resource to somebody? Once I talk to somebody, like Jason, somebody I know what to say, okay, you know what, this sounds something me and Jason discussed one time. This is a person, you know what? The way I say it, and pass the brochure on and kind of follow up with that person like that.
Well, that's what we've been doing. Let me say.
I can say I've been doing it. Yeah.
That's what
you've been doing.
Sister Deanna, we had Deanna on our show.
Yes,
she is certified.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that this is you've been doing overall. It's not being done.
But what I'm trying to say is there's a blueprint to this as far as like I graduate Saturday from the clergy, not clergy. What is it? Chaplaincy course that deals with a lot of different issues. And because I graduate from that thing, there's going to be continued education, how to deal with domestic violence, how to deal. Just as a preacher, I can't tell a 12-year-old who's been raped by her uncle to sit at the Christmas table and eat with him. I can't do that.
That's you. That's what I'm saying. That's what I said. But the statement I made was we all need to start to get something here.
But when you said resources, but here I'm saying, let me say, okay. Just because there's resources out there, I've had bad experience with this years ago. I'll just refer somebody something because I got a brochure that read good. I have to go check the place out. Years ago, I told somebody go check the brochure. I'm saying whoever me for resources.
No, but listen.
Me for resources.
Well, listen. I understand what I'm saying. It's not four of us on the screen. It's other people listen. I'm saying. So follow what I'm saying now. Everybody don't know you. I know you probably think you know much as President Kennedy and all these guys, but you're not. You're just right here. Well, I'm saying people is hearing us. I'm saying, what should they do? I'm saying they might want to contact somebody, but also start checking out people and seeing what's there. You know what I'm saying? it's just we're not having a private conversation. Unless people are listening to us. I always take things, for example, when I hear conversations on where do I take from there. I may not have the people you know. What do I do as an individual? So I don't individually say to start getting more involved with it, and then go check out places you send people to.
Right. Kind of like a vetting process. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I agree with that totally.
And one of the things with me, you know, I'm always, you know, God always bring me around people that do the things that I have an interest in as it relates to people that need this type of help. And I'm always the type of person where I want to sit down and have these conversations, because before I start referring people, I need to find out, okay, what's their background, what's their resume, what's their track record when it comes to helping people in situations such as these. So that's why I'm very big on not only just being that person in the clergy that can give my spiritual guidance on a thing, but I also want to partner with people that have that same zeal as I do, to the extent that it's a group effort in helping people where they are to get to that. I don't want to say so much that next level, but there's just another side that we need to get to. But before we get there, let's focus on how do we get here.
Right. Well, I can definitely connect everyone here to various places out there that I would recommend. There's a Black Fathers Parenthood organization that I have worked with. I've represented the people there, as well as I'm vice president on the board of directors for a local nonprofit law office that but primarily practices within this area. And at that nonprofit, what makes it different is while it is a typical law office, they charge based off income. So that helps a lot of people in our community, as well as that office isn't litigation heavy. You know, and while I don't work there anymore, I am a big promoter of mediation, right? Having parents communicate and having parents come up with their own agreement related to their own children, right? Because I tell parents often, you know, that walk into our office, I'm like, look, you can try the mediation. Well, I don't want to be in the same room as him, right? Well, you know what? Either you can try a mediation, because oftentimes it does work, or you can litigate your case, and that's going to take 18 months to maybe 3+ years. So you can try a mediation, but also at the same time, I encourage African American parents in particular with this one line: why would you give control over your kids to a random person in a black robe when you can have all of the control? Why?
I was just in court. Yeah. I was just in court, and I don't know what it was. It was custody case, and before the judge ruled on any motions or anything, they brought in a mediator to discuss with the parents. I talked to Pastor Taylor that day I left court, because I thought the judge had did a very good thing, because the mother was not able to have shelter for her child. The father was, but the father had remarried. And the judge was like, we're going to do what's best for the child, right, regardless of your situation. And I just thought this was one situation I was in that I thought, okay, the legal justice system does work. It does work. And advocating for kids is a great mission. And I understand, Pastor Taylor, I want to get back to that. I understand checking people out. And I understand you can't Google everything. And we are the sum total of our experiences. But when there's help out there, like Bright Star, our friend. We had Donnell, Dr. Barnett on one of our first shows. He's what, the second in command of mental health in the state of Illinois. So we have resources that are available to us, but do we go and get do we use the resources to find out if they're quality?
That's a good question that I would like to ask too.
Like most black people, we stick Uncle Bill in the basement and just cash his check till he died. And all he needed was some lithium to live a normal life. And lithium ain't good for you, but it helps some people. Go ahead.
If I can ask the question, Brother JP.
Sure.
What do you think is one or maybe some reason where they get the help, they get the counseling, they get the resources, but for some reason they don't follow through? What would cause a person not to follow through with the resources made available to them?
I guess in what context?
Well, let's just say it. Okay, I'll put it this way. For years, I was doing youth ministry, right? Mm-hmm. And some years ago, I was made a youth director at the church. And the situation with a lot of these young people, where there was divorced parents, no father, parents on drugs, pretty much living on their own. And I really had a job on my hands doing ministry for them, because it seemed to me they wanted me to raise these kids. Well, I'm not here to raise your kids. I'm here to provide a platform for them to have a voice that other people aren't listening to. So during this time, youth ministry is growing.
Isn't that what the teacher's saying?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, during this time that we're building up these young people, they find someone that they can relate to, that they can talk to some things about. They know that I'm going to listen. However, I knew that I wasn't qualified to provide the needs that they needed to be able to be successful just at being a teenager. When it comes to a situation like that, when you get with a child that needs these type of resources, but yet they don't follow through, what do you think are the main reasons why children don't follow through with those type of resources and influences?
I think the first one that comes to mind is the word exhaustion. In order for any of those kids to get to the point where they needed a person that was out of their immediate grasp, the surroundings, to really gravitate toward, they have to be somewhat exhausted, right? They have had to have tried and attempted with others, right? Mom, dad, brothers, right? And then finally they get to you. That's how I was.
Yeah.
Like we were mentioning earlier, when the people around you don't really listen, it becomes ingrained, or at least it did for me growing up, right? Why am I mentioning all this, but it's not hitting anyone? Like it was mentioned earlier. You're listening, but you're not retaining any of it, right? You're really not hearing me. And then that becomes ingrained to, does anyone really care? Right? Because you tell me that you love me, but yet you're not acting upon what I'm telling you that I need, right? So I think, if you're presented with these options and with these opportunities, it's just one extra thing that you got to go out and do. And oftentimes what I asked myself growing up was, I created none of these issues. I am the child, but why am I having to put in more effort than anyone else? Right? And I'd say number two is, when you're a child, and I think we can all agree with this, you're really looking at, what's happening with my childlike community, right? What are the others doing that are in my elementary program? Is anyone else going to counseling, or is anyone else having an extra after church meeting with their pastor? Probably not. And having other people your age know, or at least have some kind of inclination behind that, that's something that kids generally want, right? That's not something that I wanted. Had my parents actually been listening, and I don't know if any of them are listening to this right now, but I'm pretty comfortable in mentioning this, because I've had very honest and candid talks with them, is that had they been listening, I should have been in therapy a long time ago. Why, like I think it was mentioned earlier, why aren't we addressing these issues as they come up, right? My first time going to therapy personally was when I was in a graduate education. At that point, I did undergrad in 3 years, so I would have been 21-ish. Why am I just now addressing problems that were created when I was 1, 2, 3, and 4 at age 21, 22? By then it's almost too late, and I have extra work and extra effort that I now have to put in because no one chose to do anything. But I do think if adults address these issues like the children were having that you had worked with, the results and those consequences, whether negative or positive, probably could have been much better, and those children probably would have been in a much different place, much different.
Brother Jamison, one of the things that draws frustrations in those situations is transference. You knew you were raised by your mother and your father in the church, and you're seeing these kids struggle with things you never had to struggle with because you could go to your mom or dad. So you were transferring that to yourself. And because at the time you didn't have the proper training, and that's what we need to get back to, training, that you could deal with these situations. But I believe the answer to your question is the number one thing about that situation, we have to put a support group around those individuals. You have to find that uncle, that grandmother, that he mentioned his great grandmother and how she was the one to listen. You got to find that person, because man, I've dealt with kids in the system. I've dealt with my own family members, and it's really difficult. It's difficult, but you got to have a support system. Yeah, you got to. My mother was out of the norm. Okay, my mother probably 89. My mother be 80 years old if she was still living. But when my father died at 10, that wasn't the first time I went to go see a psychiatrist. Yeah. The first time I went to go see a psychiatrist, my hair fell out from alopecia, and the kids were teasing me, and she took me down to UIC and took me into the psychiatric building and said, somebody need to talk to my son. Wow.
Yeah, but
we don't have those parents.
You're right. Anymore. I think that, like I said, we're moving forward. Who's listening today, is that we need to start to talk about this in church. Talk about this, in fact, but find a comfortable way to bring it up. Don't just so it's not uncomfortable. If you have to talk to somebody, research how you start bringing your congregation, because some things are not discussed. I was told years ago. Mother told me church is one of the places that my mother gone for years, is that it was a place people talked about different things. They brought things up at the church. That's what people, a lot of times, she described me, she was a kid that's something black people really come together without being ridiculed and kind of bring up certain things. We got to get back to that or we can be able to bring up certain things, discuss certain things like mental health, and but not from a standpoint make everybody feel abnormal. Let's have a typical discussion about it. And we can't look at pastors can't look at this point or whoever this point of just business as usual. Butts and seats, got to preach it. I've had some pastors I work with where all the in the man was this is my selected sermons I'm preaching for this quarter, and that's what I'm going to do. And I got my itinerary, and I'm going to stick to this. It can't be about that because Jesus didn't have an itinerary like that. Only he knew about it. His stuff was changed as he went. We know God had a master plan, but if you look at reading it, he was fitting in. He was changing it where he went. That's what we had to start doing too. We had to start fitting in and bringing this stuff up. And they say find the most comfortable way to bring it. If me one day talking about it one day, bringing somebody like a Jason in, work with Dr. Jameson, and then bring them in one day, but make it comfortable. And I make people tight about it, so everybody's included. So you're not trying to sing out just the McCaskey family over here. You're talking to everybody as a whole.
Like even now, like every Saturday, I'm part of a Christian education group that's pretty much countrywide, where we come together and we talk about things in a non-judgmental manner, because we're in a time where people got problems, people have issues, and people need to be in a place where they can voice these things and don't be looked at in a weird way just because I had this issue. So it amazes me that we're supposed to be a people of holiness, but yet we're not addressing the issues of the day. So we sit there and come up with these Sunday school sermons, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with relevant issues of today that need to be addressed so that people can start getting on with their lives. And one of the biggest problems with us as a church is that we're trying to solve the problem that day, and we're not learning how to go through the process. And let's take some time to identify some things, because there's a trigger somewhere. And we need to figure out what is this trigger and where did this trigger start, and then we build from that.
Do you think, if I can ask you all as pastors, do you think part of commencing that within the churches is, and I know it would depend on the pastor, right? But do you think it begins with a pastor being more open about, maybe this is what I went through and this is how I addressed it, or this is how I wish now, looking back at it, that I had addressed it, right? And I just bring up this example because, believe it or not, I don't know what it is, but I am often... not often, but I'm often representing a pastor or the person that they're married to in a divorce case. And that brings its own unique set of challenges. And in one case, and in one case in particular, their main worry was, well, how is my congregation going to look at me now that I am the one that's actually having issues, and I am the one that is divorcing, right? So I just wonder, could this church culture begin to change if the pastors had a little bit of more of an onus on them?
One of the things that I would like to say on that issue is,
I was going to raise my hand, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, finish. James, finish.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that always needs to be the paramount in the church when it comes to certain issues such as that is that we have to be a people of grace, right? Because at some point you have to ask the question, what if that was me, right? And how would I want people to deal with me if I face that issue? So we have to be a people that really teach and live out grace, so that we can be more open on dealing with an issue that can cause people to be judged, right? Because we're always thinking about what someone is thinking about us, and they'll throw any type of scripture at you to say that you're in the wrong, but you're not helping me to get this right. So as a person that sits in the person of leadership, I not only do I lead, but I also have to be an example now, right? Because I had to follow something to be where I am right now. So if people don't see me at the point where we live out the scripture where Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ, well, now you're simply telling me that there's an example that I have to follow, and I want those people to follow after my example as I'm following Christ. So in a position such as that, yes, and Pastor Holloway mentioned it when he said something, how I was growing up with a mother and father in the home, and I see these children struggling. But now my heart goes out to them. I don't judge them, right? I'm just thinking about the fact that, man, I don't want no child to feel that way. So what do I do in a situation like that to help them realize that, hey, you don't have to go at it alone? I may not understand where you come from, but I empathize with you.
Right.
Go ahead. That's all.
Key word: empathy. Empathy.
Well, you see your hand was up. Go ahead.
Always empathy. Can I put myself in their shoes? The one thing I wanted to say about that, the church, and when you talk about the pastor and leadership, we're placed on this pedestal that is behind bricks, not glass. People don't see when my wife and I come home. They only see the public persona of First Lady and Pastor Holloway. But I try to be so transparent that I've discussed divorce. And I said this congregation would survive divorce. The church wouldn't split over us splitting. We've actually had that discussion. But my thing is, I'm 5-0. I've married 5 people, and they're all still married. And I believe it's based on my training and my premarital counseling. This is the key that I tell each of the people that I married. First of all, you got to be faith-based for me to marry. You got to be in somebody's church if you're not in my church. And the second is, you got to understand, the only job and responsibility you have to your spouse is to make sure they get to heaven. What's their responsibility? The same for you. So there's no problem, there's no issue that we cannot solve with not only prayer, but therapy. Because where did I get that little bit of information? In marriage counseling. Yes, Pastor Holloway went to marriage counseling. Had to. Or I would have gone crazy. Because me and my wife were raised differently. I'm from the street. You know what she said at my banquet? She said she married a thug. But that's a hero under God. That's what a thug is. Hero under God. That's it. That's my comment.
Yeah. Now I I think the church definitely have to do more with it. I always look at it this way. Sometimes I'm more radical one when it comes to a lot of my pastor friends is that we have to do more, because I look at this here. When I really study, you look at Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul addressed issues. He addressed what was going on. He wrote the Corinthians. He was talking about this was going, that was going on. From Corinthians 1-2, he always addressed issues. Now, I think sometimes we have to address these things, what's going on. You still can preach that word that day. Just shorten it up. Don't do your typical 45-minute sermon. Do your maybe 10-minute version of it and get to that point and talk about it, because that's part of it too. And prepare. I think we have to do that more and more and more. But here's the thing is, like I said, the sad part is some pastors, no matter how things get, they're never going to change. I've seen that. It don't matter what happened. I can just go back to what happened from 2020 to now. I see some pastors with stuff going with George Floyd and this going, they're going. They came and read that scripture and went about that like nothing was going on out there in the street. They said zero, nothing. Even when everybody got a big jump about Trump getting in, people were talking about that. Some pastors came and read that word like nothing was going on. I was kind of turned off by some of the pastors I've seen it with. I felt like address it in some kind of way, because your people are dealing with this thing. Now, here's what's interesting about it. We'll go back in history. I hate to do this. They had a way of persuading other things they wanted to. You know, that way of persuading racists when they wanted to, and looking inside that. So do the same thing now. Issues going on. That's when the AME church came out. Why? Because they wasn't allowing the other church, and they was fine with that. So I think us as people of color, we definitely have to address these things. Like I said, if you don't know how to address them, approach some of your fellow ministers. Not going to clown you and say, how would you go about doing this? Or if you got a group of people that don't know how, change your group of people to elevate you a little bit. So you're going to talk to people like a person like Pastor Holloway and Pastor Jameson and people like Hugh Jason, say, hey, how you guys go about that? Because we should sharpen each other. If some of your group keep clowning, you can say that person come out your group, because we got to start to do better. And I feel this way, right? If you don't do better, if we all are godly men or God, you're gonna be held accountable for it. You know, that's what I feel.
Yeah, and on top of that too, Pastor Tay, our pastoral care needs to really be.
You went in and out.
Are you hearing me now?
I lost you for a second. Go ahead.
No, but I was saying
I lost it for a second.
Our pastoral care needs to really be tweaked also, because
yes,
no, we always think that everything has to be on the pastor, but we need to train leaders in our congregations that can assist us in helping the families of our congregation when it comes to certain issues. One thing that I admire about a lot of the what we call mega ministries is that they have ministries that's geared toward those that had teen pregnancy,
right,
dealing with drug abuse, those that dealing with loss of parents and things of that nature. They know how to deal with those issues, and they create these small groups,
right,
where they can be more intimate and deal with the issue head on, giving biblical principles that's going to help them learn how to maneuver and navigate during those troubling waters. So, if pastor's the only one that got all the answers, well, what about the rest of us? We just up there waiting for our turn to preach, or are we actually going to assisting the families of that congregation? We need to get people educated on this.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Once again, it doesn't have to be a mega ministry.
It don't.
It has to deal. It has to deal with training. Shameful brag. My home church, St. Michael's. We have a ministry called Muggs Ministry. What is Muggs Ministry? Muggs is marriage under God. Muggs, right? Before we had Muggs Ministry, we had a single ministry. What happened in that singles ministry? Everybody got married, and we had to have Muggs Ministry. Now we have a group of single people in our church again who wants the single group to come back. So we have to shift with the need.
Right.
But I don't, as a pastor, I want to equip people. When I pray on Sunday morning, that we exalt the Savior, glorify the Father, and edify the body, that's just not for worship, that's for life. You need to live life, because no one gets out of life alive. You're going to wake up with problems tomorrow that you didn't have today. So we have to train people. We have to encourage people. Sometimes we gotta pull them, and one of the things I wanted to get to, JP, before we get away from this, you said you had a political science. You major in political science. There are some other issues. I don't know if Pastor Taylor gonna bring them up, but we had some things that occurred today in our city. That was just horrendous.
Yeah.
Now, the first message I got about the shooting in Holman Square, after having a conversation about Holman Square and what it was years ago, there's a man who gets shot, critically shot, coming on the 5th floor of Holman Square. Now, most of us don't know what's on the 5th floor of Holman Square. Well, I do. There was SWAT training going on. He grabbed somebody. They shot him and took him to the hospital. Was this man mentally deranged? Did he have psychological problems? Could they've done something other than that?
Right.
politically, people want the church, the burden of society to be on the church. I asked a gentleman a question today at lunch. Because we have black mayor, black superintendent of police, state's attorney, state Kwame state attorney too, as well as Kim Foxx. What do you want them to do? Because the violence, as we see it now, comes through social media. But when we didn't have this vehicle of social media, like that thing happened at 12 o'clock, it hit my phone at 1.
So what were you saying? Yeah.
So the young man was saying that they all should resign because they're black and they're not doing anything. But I kind of got an insight into criminal justice by being in a courtroom and understanding, having friends that are police officers and detectives and knowing what they've gone through the last 10 years, being 27-year veterans. One of my friends retired last year before he turned 55. He didn't care about the pension and the money or what he was going to lose. He just wanted out because it was crazy.
I mean,
God bless him for his service.
It definitely needs some reform. I mean, something that'd be a good topic for next week. Discuss. There need to be some form. I think they open up, get more ideas. I think some things they just haven't figured out, and some things they ain't looking into. And it's not affecting them directly. A lot of time, indirect, but not directly. So I think it's something that we definitely discuss next week, and we're gonna kind of get deeper into it. It'd be good to hear some of these gentlemen outside. It'd be a good good conversation talking about the crime in Chicago. That'd be a real good conversation.
Well, PJ, thank you. I'm gonna turn off my mic because I know he got some stuff to say. So
I'm good.
Thanks for joining us on Exposing the Narrative tonight. Pastor Taylor's going to take the last 3 minutes, and we would like to hear your final.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to say one thing real quick. You got a thing called Law Under Curious Minds. What is that about? Real quick, I know you have much time. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I bet everyone here knows what After School Matters is.
Yes.
Okay. So in in my graduate education, with a former clinical professor, Dr. Catherine McCrae, as well as now a PhD candidate, Kevin Miller. We co-created this program, particularly for African-American youth in Inglewood, as well as North Lawndale, I believe. It was called Law Under Curious Minds. And what we did was Monday through Thursday for, I think it was 3 to 4 months at a time, we would educate youth on what their rights were. But it wasn't as if we were just up there lecturing. It was more of a collaborative effort where eventually at the end, what the youth were able to do was they hosted a community-wide event where they would then educate others on what their human, civil, and legal rights are, right? They would much rather hear from other youth that look like them than adults, right? So that's what we end up doing. I can't remember the exact number, but we ended up getting a couple $100,000 for a couple years. The program is active now, as well as it was ranked one of the best programs in ASM.
So we're about to go off the air in probably about 45 seconds. We want to thank you all for both being here, and definitely look forward to doing this again. Next week, we're going to join some of the crime in Chicago. We'd love to have both of you at time to join us and have a few more guests, and we're going to break that down because we got some material loaded for that. But once again, thank you both for being. If you both can just hang out just a little bit after we shut down, just one quick question for both of you. Anyway, thanks for joining. Thank you, audience, for listening. You can turn your mic on and say bye, or if you want to. So it's been a
I'm out of mic jail. I'm out of mic jail. Hey, have a great night, everybody.
Yeah. So just hang for one quick minute. I'll wait for our engineer to sign us off. Our studio engineer, she signed us off yet? Goodbye, everybody. Did she sign us off?
Good night, y'all.
Did she sign us off?
We still being...
Views made on the preceding program are not those of WVTC Radio, iNetworks Communications, or their financial supporters.
Winning victory